screen and I'll get started. This is a very open format. Please raise your hand. Steph, would you be able to kind of monitor the chat to see for hands? And if I'm happy to stop and provide additional clarity along the way. So if you have questions, please let's not wait till the end. Let's address them as we go along, because I think we seem to get better clarity. We achieve better clarity if we kind of do it in that format. And like I said, this isn't a council meeting, it's an open house, and it's you're very welcome to interrupt me at any time with questions. So I will just share my screen with you now. And that should be up. Just need to get to the from beginning. There we are. Okay, so welcome to the 24 to 2028 5-year draft financial plan presentation. Thank you for coming. As with any budget, there's always a lot of underlying assumptions that are built into it. Those are the basis for which we make our decisions when we're putting things into the budget or doing our calculations. So some of the underlying assumptions that are built into this budget, of course, are not surprising to anyone, I don't think, but we expect that there will be continued inflationary pressures, that we will have them for the rest of 2024 and into part of 2025. So the provision for salaries and benefits, cost of living increases has been included at 4% for 2024. We do have a benchmark policy that says we look at the COLA for Vancouver at November 30th for the 12-month average change year over year. And that number this year was 4.5%. It was higher than 4% last year as well, but Council decided to cap that COLA allowance at 4%. So we're following along the same track this year, and we've put it in for 4% for 2024 and 4% again for 2025. And then we're dropping down to 3% for 2026 and 2027, 2028. Another underlying assumption then is that interest rates that we earn on our savings will remain somewhere between 4 and 5% throughout the planning period, throughout this year's planning period. So that's good news for us. We still have quite high cash balances. We got some grant funding and reserve funding. So that means that we earn a high rate of interest on those savings. So we are increasing our interest revenue estimate this year. This is interest revenue attributable to funds in the general fund. So we're estimating that revenue at about $200,000 this year. We budgeted $120,000 for the general fund last year. So we're increasing that. That does pose some interest rate risk for some of our variable rate loan, like our borrowing that we have that is subject to variable interest rates, and that is a fire truck loan that was a 5-year loan that has 3 more years left on it. And as well, we are doing interim borrowing for some of the water systems, and interim borrowing again means that it's a variable rate loan for short term until the project's finished, at which time it will get locked into the longer term interest rate at that time. So there's some interest rate risk there. If interest rates increase higher, then that would mean additional unbudgeted, unanticipated interest rate costs for those loans. We have, I'm estimating approximately $4 million remaining of expenditures on the community center. And in this budget, we're funding it through the use of about $2 million of unspent grant funds that we still have, as well as we have allocated $2 million of our Growing Communities Fund grant, which was received last year. So that's how we will complete the construction costs for the community center. Of course, we are still undertaking our fundraising campaign. We're very encouraged by the level of community support that we received this year, and we do hope to be able to fundraise the remaining budgeted expenses. And what that will mean for council is that they will then be able to reallocate that $2 million of growing community funds to other council priorities, be it infrastructure replacement, for the most part, that's typically what we would be recommending. But there are it's a very wide open grant, and it can be used in many different ways. So whatever council wishes to prioritize, should those additional funds be fundraised, that will free up that money to go to other purposes. So we're really excited and hopeful at that prospect. We do assume that the community center, and we're expecting the community center to be open to the public early in the spring 2024. The impact of non-market change. We hear this, we talk about this every year when we do the budget. So this is the year-over-year change in the assessment role. And what that represents is changes to the role. So it's the value of any new construction that has been added to the role since the last taxation year. It's the reclassification of properties. Sometimes they may change usage. They may go from residential to business or residential to farm. So it's the impacts of any of those changes to properties on the roll. It's not market driven. What was a significant one for us this year, of course, relates to the CRC lots at Cape Roger Curtis. They've changed ownership from privately owned to Metro Vancouver owned. Metro Vancouver, of course, is exempt from property taxes. So those lots at CRC will be reflected as a non-market change in our assessment roll this year. So the impact of non-market change on our assessment roll is that the value of all the new construction throughout the municipality is going to add about $38 million of value to the tax roll. And this is, of course, is going to have downward pressure on the impact of any tax rate increases. The opposite effect, of course, is that there's a change in ownership of those lots. That is removing about $54 million of taxable property value from the assessment roll. So that is going to have upward pressure on the impact of all of the changes to the tax rates. So all in all, looking at the BC assessment notices that you would have received a couple of weeks ago, it did show that on average there was a drop of market value of about 2% on average per BC assessment, bringing kind of the average single house value for 2024 to about $1.585 million. But market change alone, it doesn't impact the amount of property tax that a property owner whose property changes in accordance with that average drop. It's not going to impact that property owner. Market change impacts property taxes paid only when a property owner's assessment value changes significantly more or less than the average change across the municipality. And it's kind of a tricky concept, but I did find some really helpful videos from BC Assessment that they've put out to really help people to better understand the relationship between assessed value and the amount of property tax that they pay. So I am putting these links in the presentation. They'll be available on our website. And if you're interested, I encourage you to take the time to just go and give them a watch. They're just 3 or 4 minutes each, but they're really interesting and helpful videos. So for our, the impact for our community in 2024, the net impact of all the upward pressure and all the downward pressure, it's going to result in a bit of a reduction in the total assessment roll value. And for the average homeowner, it would add approximately $13 per average homeowner to their tax bill. And that's in addition to the property tax increase that we are proposing this year. Again, also, we've talked about how the tax increase is also dependent on your property's performance in relation to the rest of the community, but it also takes into account, it doesn't include any of the changes to the local service area parcel taxes. So if you live in Eagle Cliff or you live in Tunstall Bay, any of the water districts, sewer districts that have parcel taxes, those are not impacted by the general tax rate increase. We set all of those rates specifically, and we set a flat rate amount each year for those properties. Just wanted to take a little time to talk about our operations revenue. This budget that I'm presenting today is only our general fund. It doesn't include any of the water or sewer areas or the library. It's just the general fund. So the revenues, the first line item on our revenue in the budget is the parcel tax, and that's the garbage parcel tax. So we are proposing that the garbage, waste and garbage parcel tax be increased to $628 per year per property from $617. The next one is looking at that is our sale of service revenue. So that's our most, for the most part, it's our permits and our fees. It's our recreation fees, our wharf fees, that kind of stuff. And we do expect those to increase next year. The most significant increase in there is about $35,000 of additional recreation fee revenue. And we have put in an allowance for community center rental revenue when we do open that in the spring and throughout the rest of the year. We've put a line item in there to estimate approximately $50,000 in rental revenue. Our grant revenue, there's quite a few grants bundled in there. Most significantly is the unspent $2 million of the community center. There's grant funding that we've been approved for the multi-use path, $754,000 there. We have some money that is made available to us from TransLink to work on the municipal road network, and that's Trunk Road. Anytime you hear municipal road network, it's a road that is called a regional road, and some of the maintenance costs are offset by TransLink. So we do have up to $120,000 to offset the cost of maintaining that road. We have climate action funds, which are going to get some attention in this year's budget. We have grant funding awarded for part of the Eagle Cliff water upgrade project. Much of that project includes replacement of culverts under the road, under the water system, that we want to do that at the same time as the water pipes are replaced. So there is funding in that grant, which is dedicated to the cost of replacing those culverts. So a portion of the Eagle Cliff grant will be recognized within our general operations to help us carry out that culvert replacement work. As well, we've got some significant fire and emergency planning grant revenue planned. Much of it is approved. There is a significant amount that is not approved. There's a $150,000 disaster mitigation risk planning grant, which we're hopeful that we will receive. The other side of that is if we don't receive that grant, then we're not going to go forward with the project. So we put it in, it's an aspirational budget that will get the money. We put the offsetting expenses in, and if the grant doesn't materialize, then we won't go forward and spend that money either. So it really has kind of a nil impact on general tax rates. Lastly, every year, small communities under 5,000 receive funding from the province. We are expecting about 437,000 this year. That's much in line. It really just gets increased by COLA each year. It's a very consistent, reliable, stable grant. Development revenue, that's our permits, our rezoning fees, that kind of thing. They are, we're estimating 308,300 this year, and that's down a little bit from last year. We're trying to be conservative there. We know that permit applications did slow over the course of the year. We think that that trend is likely to continue. Of course, with high interest rates, people are less likely to borrow money or remortgage to do renovations and that kind of thing. So we want to take a conservative approach, and we're estimating that that will has a possibility of dropping next year as well. And then we have this other income line. This is kind of our catch-all line. It does include some smaller miscellaneous revenues, and it does include our investment income. And as I mentioned earlier, we are anticipating that we will have a significant increase of investment income, and we've upped that by just over 100,000 for this year. So when we get to the property tax revenue piece, we are budgeting that the property tax revenue requirement to balance the budget is going to increase to just over 8.2 million from last year was 7.5 million. And that is an increase of 715,350. and represents a 9.5 increase from 2023 for the coming year 2024. And for the average property tax payer, for the average homeowner, that's going to work out to approximately $304 per property for the average homeowner. What's driving that 9.5? We can kind of break it out into some big blocks. About 1.5% of that increase is related to net new reserve fund contributions, which drive our capital programs. 3.4% of the 9.5 is necessary to fund the additional supplies and services, professional fees that we've included in the budget this year. We have about 2.2% of that 9.5 is driven by staffing changes. There's been a couple of new FTE asks, and there's also we have the impact of the full year staffing of the community center complement of staff coming on. And lastly, the 2.4% of the 9.5 is made up from COLA and grid progression and labor market adjustment payments that were made to staffing as well. We also have an amount provisional in there set aside to settle our union contract, our labor negotiations that will be upcoming with our outside staff workers. Our operations budget, you can see the increase year over year is about $981,000 in operations costs, and that represents an increase of about 12.5%. So the distribution of the expenses, you can see on this slide where they go department by department. I'm going to take kind of a macro view and just kind of talk about what some of the changes are. So we are looking at about $414,000 in our additional supplies and services. We're looking at about $271,000 in the staffing changes for the new changes to staffing, and $296,000 for labor market and COLA for existing staff. Oh, I need to read this over here, sorry. So within that supply increase, some of the big things that I can easily identify and pull out for you, we are anticipating perhaps up to $50,000 increase to our audit and legal fees this year. We have included a $20,000 increase for records management. We do have $232,000 of new fire and emergency planning expenses. Of course, those are they're grant funded expenses, so they have their own revenue up top. It's not being funded from property taxes, but it does drive the increase in the operations budget. We have included up to $40,000 estimate to revamp our IT needs, and we do have about $50,000 set aside as we anticipate when we get our insurance premiums in for the year. We do anticipate some very significant increases there, as well as some with our new buildings, our new fire hall, some of our locations. We are expecting to see increased utilities costs there. In the new staffing, I think I mentioned it, we do have a collective agreement settlement estimate embedded in there. We have the added cost for the full year of our facility manager and partial year for our custodial staffing. We do have a new 0.4 FTE assistant fire chief request in there. And as well, there are some additional increases to recreation staffing. That's from the program delivery side. So again, this is another one of those things that's funded through the additional recreation fee and isn't come from property taxes exactly, but it does overall increase year to year operational expenses. And lastly, in our existing staffing complement costs, we did provide for a 4% COLA and grid progression. That is estimate to pay that would be about $186,000. And we do have the full year impact of the labor market review adjustments that were made last year. They were implemented halfway through the year. Now we have the full year impact of those, which is going to cost about $109,000. looking at our statutory reserve funds. So our capital expenditures, our equipment purchases, and our infrastructure renewal, they're typically not funded from property taxes. They're typically funded through reserve fund contributions. So I wanted to just kind of show a picture of what that looks like, our contributions versus our utilization of statutory reserve funds for the planning period. So the blue columns are the total amount contributed to statutory reserves starting in 2023 and going on through 2024 through 2028. You can see a big contribution 2023, a much smaller contribution 2024, and that's growing over the next 5-year period. And the other side of it, the green, that is what we're drawing out of reserves in order to fund those capital investments. Again, 2023 was relatively low. In 2024, we have some very significant capital requirements that are requiring that we withdraw a large amount from our reserve funds. And then what you see is that they begin to level off to where we think that an annual contribution of about $2 million invested in capital is sustainable, and it is what we need to be doing to make sure that we maintain our infrastructure in a safe state of repair. The thing about 2023 that makes it look a bit skewed, though, is that in 2023, we did have $2.2 million of one-time provincial government money in our Growing Communities Grant Fund. So that was contributed to the reserve. And so if we back that extraordinary one-time gift from the government out, what it makes our actual graph look like is more like this. So you can see that, that the effort here is to really focus on sustaining those annual contributions, those blue lines, and increasing them by a sustainable, predictable amount year over year. And as well, you can see in 2024, the plan is to get through a significant backlog of deferred capital projects, get them done, get them out of the way, and then gradually get us to that $2 million a year investment in capital upgrades. So that's what we're planning for. That's what we're aiming for. And we'll just see those contributions and those withdrawals continue along this pattern for the next predictable planning period. So in 2024, this budget, it includes about $180,000 additional property tax funded contributions to our reserve funds than it did in 2023. And like I said, the goal here is to sustain and increase those contributions each year to ensure that we can support our capital infrastructure. 2024, I mentioned it, it shows significant utilization of those referred funds to just deal with the urgent infrastructure projects, Carter Road Bridge and those culvert replacements in those water districts. And over time, our investment in capital infrastructure should be sustained at $2 million per year. And so looking at our estimated calculated closing year-end balances on our reserve funds, after making this big withdrawal in 2024 to fund those projects, the expectation is that with the additional contributions and the leveling off of the withdrawals over the next few years, we will see a dedicated and concentrated intentional growth in those closing balances year over year. That's the plan. The capital budget has this is what the managers, the staff have identified as projects that are urgently need to be done this year. 2024, the projects along the top are kind of the annual investments that we want to see in each of these departments. For the fire department, there's a significant amount that should be going in there this year in order to replace all of the SPCA, the self-contained breathing apparatus equipment. So that equipment has a very specified lifespan. It becomes difficult to obtain repair parts for it after a while, and the equipment is old and outdated. So when it gets replaced, it needs to be replaced with the same equipment all at one time. They always have to make sure, because when those decisions are made quickly, the firefighters can't be fumbling around with different makes of equipment. So they're always replaced in one go. So that is a significant expenditure this year included there for about 250. And then there's some other pieces of equipment in there for a total estimated expenditure of 325 this year. Technology, we talked about that. We have ongoing annual investment in computer renewal, IT renewal. This year with the staff moving into the community center, there's likely going to be some additional costs associated with that. So that's why we've increased the budget by about $40,000 this year. Ongoing annual amounts for trail maintenance. We are expecting to dedicate an annual amount to renew our fleet and mobile equipment. The culverts are in there this year for just over 800,000, and paving and road resurfacing work is planned in there. About $500 of ongoing regular road maintenance, plus there is a line item this year for the trunk road maintenance that is going to be funded by that money that is coming from TransLink. We've got the multi-use path in there. The significant capital project, though, that really is skewing things for us this year is the replacement of the Carter Road Bridge. It's a significantly expensive piece of infrastructure to replace, and it really is at its end of its useful life. So that's slated in there for just over $1.3 million. There is the boardwalk out at Headwaters Park in there for $100,000. Pit toilet construction is, according to our parks plan, we have 2 sites that are planned to have added pit toilets. We're considering doing some energy efficiency products at the fire hall, such as solar panels or rainwater catchment to help reduce operating costs. And there is fire hall addition is the fire chief and the assistant fire chiefs have requested that the area around the fire hall be paved in order to reduce the difficulty, as you can see outside today, of plowing the snow in the wintertime. It becomes an access issue for the volunteers, as well as moving the trucks around when it becomes difficult to plow. So they have requested that the aprons there be paved. Library building annex has some underground work that's needed to be done, connecting some pipes to the sewer. It's filling it in. There is a presentation which Patrick, our Director of Engineering, presented to Council on December 13th that really goes into detail about many of his public works capital projects. So I will add the link to our budget page to that meeting, and any more significant detailed updates on any of these little projects are available in that presentation. Community center construction we talked about, $4 million left on that project. And we have put in an amount, we've called it furniture and fixtures, but we do believe that there's probably going to be some one-time acquisitions necessary to get the community center up and running, and then probably weren't in the construction budget. So we've put a provision in there for that. And other miscellaneous capital expenditures at 24 brings our expected annual general fund capital expenditures to just shy of $9 million for this year. $6 million for next year. And then you can see where we're expecting to level off at an annual investment of just somewhere around 2 million. For those who like it visually, you can see we're coming off of a very large budgeted expenditure capital year. We didn't quite finish the community center, so a lot of those are carrying over to 2024, but it's still a significant expenditure year for us, dropping a little bit in 2025 and then dropping down through 26 to 28 for that target 2 million. Debt service costs over the course of the period are going from 662,000 jumping up to 751,000 by the end of 2028. This is only the general fund interest and principal repayments, and any interest and principal payments that are incurred in local service areas will be in addition to this, paid for by the the residents that live within those local service areas. We do have a maximum debt that we're allowed to incur. It's equal to about 75% of overall municipal revenues. And there is a chart here that kind of shows where we're at on that schedule and where we, possibly could be, should all of those potentially anticipated long-term debt issues go forward. So right now, we're sitting at about 35% of our maximum annual debt servicing costs with the new Blue Water Park, the Eagle Cliff, if the compost project goes ahead, and if the request from Public Works to borrow additional funding to do the works yard goes ahead, that would push us to about 56% of our annual maximum debt threshold. And then in the more longer term, certainly there's additional Eagle Cliff upgrades that could be done. There's more that could be done in Blue Water, and there's certainly the issue of how do we expand the wastewater treatment plant with a potential cost of $6 million there. By the time the municipality borrowed to pay for all of those capital projects, we'd be pretty much getting close to our limit. We'd be sitting at about 68.4% of our borrowing cap. So there's a lot on the horizon, and there's a lot of choices that are going to need to be made about how these projects are eventually going to be funded. Yeah, there's what's not in here is in this budget is the compost project, and we'll be talking about that actually in right now. So in this budget, council does have some decisions to make. So the next section of the multi-use path from Artisan Lane to Charlie's Lane is planned in this budget. We've included $886,000 of capital costs. A big portion of that is grant funded, about $752,000 we could use available grant funds to pay for. And that would require our contribution to be $134,000. Same with 2025. We could fund an additional expenditure of multi-use path with $707,000 of grant funds. Now, the 2025 allocation of grant funding is not yet approved. It's the applications have gone in, but we're still waiting to hear back from the Ministry of Transportation as to whether the request for an additional $500,000 of grant funding will be approved. And should we get that approval, then that would leave us with $127,000 of BIM funded requirement. So over the 2 years, the total cost that's been included in the budget is just over $1.7 million of multi-use path construction. And the draft budget includes a municipal contribution of $261,000. So this budget contemplates that the municipal contribution is going to be made primarily through the use of climate action funds. Now, climate action funds we have $204,000 of funding. It comes from the provincial government, and it must be used and spent on eligible projects that target the reduction of greenhouse gases. It also has a deadline on it. It must be spent within the next by March 31st, I think, of 2025. So there are many worthy projects, many ideas have been put forward and suggested for the use of these funds. For example, the $204,000 could be used to improve energy efficiency of our municipal buildings. There has been an idea floated to install solar panels on the fire hall or install heat pumps to replace the propane heater in the fire hall. As well, they could use it to install water catchment to reduce the reliance on treated municipal water at the fire hall. And we've also identified that there is a need to install a bike shed and electric charging stations at the community center. So those are all eligible uses of that money that would bring many benefits to the community and good ways to spend it. On the other hand, there's also the request to use the money to include into the on-island compost project. And council still has yet to make a decision on our on island compost project. It's still, if they do want to go ahead and include that in the budget, then we will add it to the draft financial plan. What that'll look like is the project itself. It has a budget of about $1.64 million. It is funded through a combination of grants and donations, but does require a municipal contribution of about $520,000. So we don't have it in this budget, and we would need to borrow up to $520,000 to complete this project. The cost to borrow, 520,000, at current interest rates, we're paying about 5.6% on variable loans right now. The cost to manage that interest and principal costs are about $120,000 per year. And there is an equipment financing program that we could access, which we would have ready access to $520,000 of borrowing. And it's a borrowing process offered by the Municipal Finance Authority, and it doesn't require that we go through any kind of elect or assent. So the benefits of this project, it is expected to reduce our operating costs. It will do that by reducing our contractor costs to transport the organics into town, and we will have reduced tipping fees at our Metro Vancouver transfer station. Overall, we think that the annual operating costs, including the borrowing for the next 5 years, of operating this the compost facility would be about $198,000. And we estimate that the operating cost savings from the tipping fees and from the contract labor would be about $140,000. So for years 1 to 5, while we're still repaying that debt, we believe that the extra increase in costs would be about $58,000 per year. And there is also an objective identified that we will sell the end product on island to homeowners or to contractors and landscapers. And we've included where we believe that a conservative estimate of that revenue is approximately $15,000 per year. So that would further reduce the net operating costs of the on-island compost facility to approximately $43,000 per year. And a $43,000 taxpayer-funded increase would be about 0.6% on top of the 9.5. Now, after 5 years, it looks it looks more attractive. After 5 years, once the debt is repaid, the operating cost savings are expected to be quite significant, about $70,000 per year. And so by choosing to, instead of using those climate action funds in the multi-use path, if council were to direct the use of climate action funds to this project instead, that means that the debt would be paid off about 2 years sooner, and the significant cost savings would be achieved after about 36 months of operations. So you can see it's a choice, and there's a trade-off there. This means then that the multi-use path funding would need to come from somewhere else, and we haven't identified anywhere else that money has other than accumulated surplus. So our accumulated surplus is our insurance policy money. It's our rainy day fund, and it's the money that we use as working capital to get us from January to June each year, because we don't collect our property taxes until July 1st. So we still have all our operations that we pay for from January to June, and we fund those expenses through use of our accumulated surplus. So it is very important that we maintain an adequate balance of accumulated surplus. I'm personally very protective of it. So the only other source of funding for multi-use path would be to dip into that accumulated surplus pot. Things that are upcoming. Council still needs to receive the budget submission from the library board. There is the potential for additional tax rate impacts there. There has been a provision for an increase in the grant to the library board for next year. My sense is that it will come in higher. So I believe the library board meets tonight, and we should be receiving their budget submission in due course. Again, we do have contract negotiations with our union partners. That begins later this month. there possibly could be potential for additional tax rate impacts there. As well, we do have an employee benefit review underway. Again, it's a significant cost for us each year, so that also has the potential to have implications for property tax rates up or down. I don't have a sense of where that could possibly go. The budgets that are set by the other locals levels of government, they don't affect our municipal budget in any way, but they do they certainly impact the general taxpayer, the amount of money that the general taxpayer has to pay each year. So we don't tend to get any of these finalized budget numbers from the other taxing authorities until a little bit later in the process. But as we get the information, we can certainly put that out and translate that into what an average homeowner can expect to pay in addition to the municipal tax rate each year. We do want to solicit resident feedback. Council will consider all feedback received as part of their budget decision-making process. The written submissions may be directed to a dedicated email address at budget@bimbc.ca. And residents may always attend any public council meeting and speak during the public comment section directly to Mayor and Council. I have included a link to the council meeting schedule here in this presentation. And as well, we have a dedicated 2024 budget page available on our website. There's a link in the presentation here. And we will be adding new information throughout the budget consultation process. We'll probably be adding information right up until the final budget adoption, which is here. We are here January 9th to 31st. We're in the public consultation piece. This will continue. We will present this public consultation to council in February. And based on that feedback, we will come back with a second draft of the budget. Also one that includes all of the combined local advisory areas, the water and sewer areas. We will present a second draft of the budget towards the end of February. Budget needs to go to council, for 3 readings in April, and we expect to have the final draft 5-year financial plan reconsidered and adopted at the meeting of April 22nd. So I'm happy to take your questions and comments, and thank you for attending my presentation today. How do I stop sharing? So were you aware of any questions or comments, Steph?
I don't see any in the chat. Oh, but I see Jane.
Hi, Jane.
Hi, Kristen. Sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I haven't used Zoom for a while. Thanks very much for the presentation. And I'm speaking on behalf of the Bowen Island Golf Association. That's the new hat that I wear as president. We're very concerned, and a lot of the members are very concerned about the condition that Beach Drive is currently in. It's, if you've driven down there between the end of Cowan Road and the golf course, it's the potholes are really quite dramatic. They eat up little cars as you're driving along. Just wondering, in the budget, where would road maintenance be? I'm not talking about resurfacing the road. Just to fill in the potholes would be greatly appreciated, and ultimately it would be better if the road could be redone. But I'm trying to look. I know that you've got capital expenditures, the paving and road resurfacing, but I'm assuming that Public Works is allocated a certain amount. And wondering, how does a person impact the decisions that Public Works might make in terms of the allocation of their budget? I believe that you have had some traffic counts done to indicate the number of people that go Cowan's Road. It would be interesting to know how many actually go down Beach Drive, because with the golf course, with Seymour Bay Park, with the restaurant that we currently have down there, and then access, of course, to the heliport. It's a very busy road, probably one of the busier secondary roads on the island.
Mhm.
So just wondering if you can help me on that. I, appreciate that you're not head of public works, but you're certainly head of the public purse. So any indication of how the money is allocated?
Certainly that kind of sort of smaller repair work is done in the operational budget. It
Yeah.
is a combination of materials, that pothole filling, cold pack stuff, and staff time to do it. You're right about the director of engineering sort of having the final say on what the plan is for which roads to undergo major repairs in any year, because ongoing maintenance of potholes and stuff is so dynamic. I think that is sort of left to the operational side of things to kind of figure out where the most need is. So, it's a road that maybe they don't get down there a lot. Maybe they haven't seen it in a while. I don't know, but I would encourage you to just send them an email to put your request in that, hey, there is a degree of pothole maintenance that really needs done on this road.
So that's the director of engineering.
Yeah,
Is that what you're recommending?
that's what I would. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Yep.
Plus,
And the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So if
Yeah,
you
well.
don't hear back, send another one.
You don't know what you're saying, Kristen, in terms of squeaky wheels. We can get lots of squeaking going. So
There you go.
that's great. Thank you very much. And I do commend you in your budget, because you've got there's a lot of balls up in the air right now,
Oh,
and
thank
a
you.
lot of demands on a relatively small
Yeah.
financial base. So thank you. But
Thank
you will
you.
be hearing from us.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
I don't have anyone in the chat. I've got 5 people present. Does anyone else have a
Okay.
question?
Well, we will make this presentation available on part of our budget open house. We'll also get Janet, our wonderful communications officer, on it to advertise it and tweet out the link to it and encourage people to go to the page and watch the presentation. And we do have I'm going to go through this presentation a second time on the 25th. So my hope is that we'll be able to stir up enough interest in it, enough interest in it between now and January 25th, when I present it again, that perhaps we'll get some additional attendees live who have maybe already watched the presentation online and have thought about it and have some additional questions perhaps that they might want to. Oh, I see a hand up. Hi, Kathy. You're
Hi
muted.
there.
Hi.
I think I'm okay
Welcome.
now. So we had this meeting, when was that? Monday, about the active transportation plan,
Mhm,
and there were a lot of big dollar signs on that. So
mhm.
that is a project which is not yet. That would have to change for some future budget.
Mhm.
There are new projects. So the ones you've described are the ones you've already identified. But there's always things that are going to appear. So how do the new things they will change your predictions, right?
They will. A lot of those projects too, they require other contributions from other governments or other grant funded programs. So it appears that the provincial government seems committed to active transportation, that those grants are going to be available in the years to come. So I think with some feedback from Transportation Committee, Accessibility Committee, that kind of thing, that we'll be able to prioritize a lot of those projects that have been identified in the active transportation report. Council will be able to decide which ones they want to move forward with, and that will get the ball rolling on any kind of grant applications, and we'll have an idea. It will take some time. Those aren't going to be projects that we can get started on, within this next planning fiscal period for sure, but it will guide our priorities, and it will guide our grant applications in the years to come for sure.
Okay, interesting.
It
Thanks.
also one other thing is any development applications that come forward, now that those transportation needs have been identified in that plan, that also helps in any conversations with developers about what amenities perhaps that we could be asking for. So there's a lot of different ways that those big significant transportation projects are going to come about. Certainly not all of it is going to be able to be funded by the general taxpayer, I don't think. Thank you for the question. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, I see a couple of counselors there, but this is likely their second or third time through seeing the presentation, so I guess you're pretty familiar with it now. So if that's all there is, then I'm happy to sign off and thank you all for attending. Please do review the presentation again if you felt that you had additional questions, or do reach out to me by that budget@bimbc.ca email, and I will respond to you directly. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Kristen.